so important when it comes to succeeding at language learning, at anything really in life. And when I say failure, it doesn't necessarily mean that you fail a test or you have some kind of huge catastrophic failure. It doesn't have to mean that. What it does mean is that you put yourself in a position where you are able to learn and where you're also able to make mistakes. Failure comes in all kinds of sizes and shapes and all forms. So failure could be trying to have a conversation in your language and forgetting the word and saying something embarrassing. It also could be failing a test. It could be something like that. And I've done this a few times. I have to admit, I've done a few times, a few tests in my life. I have failed. And those concepts, those subjects, those things that I failed are the things that I am best at now. They're the things that I put the most effort into becoming good at because I failed at them. So failure, it doesn't mean that you can't do it. It definitely doesn't mean that you can't do something. It means that this thing that you failed at, this thing that you made a mistake at, this thing that you are not able to do in this moment is the thing that needs your attention. And you put that attention in there, you put that effort in there, and it just might end up being one of your strengths later on. And then the other areas as well, of course you continue to work at the other areas as well. Like, let's say you take a Spanish test and you fail. Well, your other languages, you're going to keep working on those as well. In that failure, essentially what we're looking here at with failure is what it means to fail and why failure ultimately makes us more successful people, because the most successful people have failed far more times than they've been successful. And that's the way it is, because in order to become successful, in order to do something that challenges you, that something that hasn't been done before, or something that is at an exceptionally high level, it takes pushing yourself past what you were already able to do, what you were able to do in this moment, whatever that is, whether it's in your language, it's being able to speak or read, or it's anything in your life. It takes pushing yourself past that, even if it's just a little bit, pushing yourself past that enough that creates a space where you can either fail or you can succeed. And if you fail, you look at what happened, you look at the events, and you look at how you can improve, and you improve. If you succeed, well, then you push yourself a little bit further outside of that comfort zone, outside of what you're already able to do, and you create even more of a space for failure to come in so that you can correct and move forward, or you can create more space where failure can occur. So we are inviting failure, and we are using it as a tool to move us forward. And that failure, like I said, any size, any amount, any kind of mistakes, and we're learning from that. Now, it doesn't mean that we're like looking to fail. We're like, oh man, I want to do this because I want to fail. Said like no one ever, right? But it's about that, knowing that if I try something and it doesn't work, it doesn't mean anything about me personally and my ability to be successful in that area. What it means is that that specific set of circumstances didn't work, and I need to change one of the variables within that set of circumstances. I need to change one of the circumstances, right? And so that's what it teaches us, and that's why we move toward failure and success simultaneously, because we are using one, kind of bouncing back and forth between one and the other, but ultimately we're becoming more successful as we have some experiences with failure. So I want you to think about a time in your life when you failed at something, anything, when something didn't go your way. And it doesn't have to be academic. It can be a test, like you mentioned, like tests, you know, we usually think of those pass, fail. It can be anything. It can be with your friends. It can be like you went on a date and it was terrible and you're so embarrassed. It could be that you were learning how to swim and you've got to be safe as a lifeguard. I don't know, anything, absolutely anything that you consider a failure. That happened to me when I was a kid. I had to be saved by a lifeguard when I was like 10 or so, maybe, and I became a lifeguard when I was a teenager. So I am attracted to failure. It is like I'm like failure, and then I'm like how can I become so good at this? So think of something, okay, get something in your mind, and then hold that there. All right, think about it, remember it, remember how you felt in that moment, right? How did you feel? And you can even close your eyes, right? Think about it. How did you feel? Where were you? What was around you? What were your surroundings like? Like, how did it sound? Anything, like, put yourself there in that moment. Were there any smells? Anything you felt? Like right now I feel a breeze as I'm sitting outside. Anything. Maybe you'd like tasted something. I don't know. Right now I'm supposed to taste my saliva. But anything you can do to put yourself in that moment, right? Put yourself there. And you felt. Okay? Now, in that moment when you failed, it was there. What was the outcome later on? Like, what happened after you failed? Did you persevere? Did you find a way to be successful? Or did you maybe give in to failure? And either way, it's okay, right? All of us have given in to failure at some point or another. We've said, like, okay, this isn't for me. Sometimes that's what failure does. Sometimes you fail at something and then you're like, all right, this just is not in alignment with my goals, with who I am, with what I want to do. So if you like failed and you didn't go back to it, that's okay. Now, if you failed and you didn't go back to it and you're like, I've always wanted to conquer this, that's different. So how did you feel afterwards? How did you approach it? Did you go back and say, I'm going to do this, and you figured out a way to get it done and got it done? So I want you to think about that. Okay? How did you approach it? Alright, so let's look at what should be like 3 different possibilities for how you could approach failure. Like I mentioned pretty much right there, right? When you encounter an obstacle like that, failure, you can either accept it and go a different direction, or you can find a way through it. You can find a way through it, and you know what? Maybe there's only 2. There's only 2, right? You either can accept it and go around it. You can just leave it and say, all right, I'm not going to do this. Or you can go through it. You can find a way around it, go over it, under, however, and that's how you can approach it. So thinking about those 2 options now and coming back to language learning. When we are learning a language, and some of these failures might be obvious, like a test. Of course, we always come back to test. Some of them might be like, okay, my goal was to be able to have a conversation in my language after a year, and I didn't achieve it. So some of them are a little bit more fluid, right? It's like, okay, what do you determine to be a conversation? But either way, you can say, okay, I did achieve that. And you can look at that obstacle, right? And say, okay, does that mean I'm going to give up on the language? Or does that mean I'm going to find a way to learn that language? So giving up on the language, of course, might mean that you just stop. You're like, okay, I'm done. I'm going to learn a different language. Which, it's every person has their own process. I'm not going to say that that is necessarily wrong, because it's not wrong in all circumstances. You might find that, again, it's just not a fit for you, and maybe a different language is better for you at that time. So here's the key too, is that yes, we have these 2 options, but it's not necessarily true that one of those options is going to be right forever. You might say, okay, I'm done, not doing this. A year or 2 later, your perspective might change around it. You might have like a little boost of energy and come back to it and be like, okay, now I'm ready. Now it's in alignment with where I am. Like, you are trying to learn Chinese, for example, and you are just struggling so much with them, the writing, characters, all the sounds, the tones, and you're like, no, I'm done. And then you say, okay, you know what, I'm gonna learn Spanish instead, because I'm an English speaker and there's a ton of Spanish speakers around me. I'm gonna learn Spanish. And you get really good at Spanish. You spend like 3 or 4 years and you just get really good at Spanish. And then you're like, you know what, I feel good now. I'm gonna try Mandarin. I'm gonna go back. Well, that's an example of the circumstances changing, right? Now you're like, I already have experience with learning one language, learning a language that's easier for me to learn. Now I'm going to learn something that's a little more challenging, because now I already know how to learn another language. Now I'm more equipped, I'm better prepared to learn Mandarin. So that, circumstances can change. Just because you decide this isn't right for me, I can't do this right now, doesn't mean it's going to stay that way forever. Alternatively, you might say, I'm learning Mandarin. Like, I have to learn Chinese. I just have to. And you're struggling. Well, I'm sorry, you guys, I'm like doing this. I don't know, there could be ants down here, but don't mind me. So, alternatively, right, you might say, oh man, I've got to do this, whether it's like you have to or whether it is because you just really want to, right? And so you find a way. You enroll in a class, or you get a private tutor, or you go and study in China, or you do something, like you make it happen. Now that is an example of perseverance through that obstacle, going through that and confronting your failure in that moment. And by moment, I mean like, a year or so that you're like practicing, like, I'm going through this, I'm finding my way, I'm going to try all these different things, I'm going to keep going until I get through there. So that would be the other route. That would be going through it and not accepting no for an answer, not accepting failure. All right? So that is why you must fail in order to succeed, how you can fail, different examples of failure, and how we approach failure as language learners and as people in life. Alright, I'll see you guys back here next Tuesday with another video. Check out that blog post down below in the description. Leave comments, leave all that stuff. I'll be around, and I'll see you guys back here next time. Bye!